Watch the security cameras at Simon Fraser University in Surrey, British Columbia. 10:22 at night. Captured a young woman walking through the campus corridors. She's smiling, laughing with her friend. Her steps are confident, relaxed. She has no idea that someone is watching her every move. 19-year-old Maple Batalia looks like any other college student on a Monday night. Books in hand, plans to study, a whole future ahead of her. The camera follows her through the hallway. She's completely at ease. But here's what makes this footage so chilling. Hours earlier, at 8:07 that same evening, a different camera captured something else. A white Dodge Charger with distinctive racing-style taillights enters the university parking structure. It circles slowly. Then it parks, and it waits. The car sits there for hours. Someone inside is watching, waiting. At 1:01 in the morning, the library closes. Maple packs up her things. Security footage shows her leaving with 3 male friends. They're talking, laughing, walking together toward the parking garage. Everything seems normal. Then, just as they approach the parking lot, the camera does something that will haunt investigators for years. It swivels away. These cameras rotate on preset patterns, and at the exact moment Maple needs surveillance the most, the lens turns in the opposite direction. At 1:04, 911 operators receive multiple calls, gunshots, screaming, chaos. Moments later, cameras capture the white Charger speeding out of the parking lot. The license plate is too blurred to read. The car vanishes into the night. So who was the young woman walking through those campus corridors that night? Before we continue, don't forget to like this video, hit the subscribe button so you never miss any coverage in this channel.
It was a particularly disturbing and heartbreaking crime, the murder of Maple Batalia. Now, nearly 8 years to the day since the young SFU student was gunned down by her ex-boyfriend, Global News has learned he has been granted an escorted leave from prison.
Maple Batalia was born in India. Her family moved to Canada when she was just a baby. They were searching for a better life, a fresh start, new opportunities. Her father, Harkarat, chose her name carefully. He called her Maple as a tribute to their new country, to the beautiful tree that symbolizes Canada. It was a name full of hope, full of promise, and Maple lived up to that promise every single day. By 19 years old, she was already making her mark. Maple was a health sciences student at Simon Fraser University's Surrey campus. She maintained a perfect grade point average. She was on the pre-med track. Her dream was to become a doctor, but academics weren't her only passion. Maple had also built a career in entertainment. At 17, she landed a commercial for a pharmacy coffee shop. By 19, she had appeared in the teen comedy diary of a wimpy kid, Roderick Rules. She even scored a role in the television series The Secret Circle, which featured her first on-screen kiss. She was balancing it all: school, acting, modeling, friendships. And she made it look easy. Maple came from a close family. Her parents, Harkarat and Sarbjit, were deeply devoted to her. She had an older sister named Rosaline. The family was tight-knit, supportive, proud of everything Maple had accomplished. Those who knew her described her as kind, non-confrontational. She never spoke harshly about anyone. She was driven, yes, but also genuinely happy. She had that rare combination of ambition and warmth that drew people to her. Her father would later call her his precious jewel. Her mother held on to every moment they shared. Maple represented everything her parents had sacrificed for when they left India. She was proof that their decision to move halfway across the world had been worth it. She was living the life her parents had sacrificed everything for. At 19, Maple had already achieved more than most people do in a lifetime. She had a clear path ahead of her: medical school, a career helping others, maybe more acting roles, a family of her own someday. But there was one part of her life that wasn't going well, one relationship that would unravel everything. And it started with a breakup. Maple had been dating a young man named Gurjinder Dhaliwal since high school. Friends called him Gary. The relationship was on and off, sometimes good, sometimes rocky. But Maple's family initially approved of him. That changed in mid-August of 2011. Maple discovered that Gurjinder had been cheating on her. She did what any self-respecting person would do. She ended the relationship. But Gurjinder refused to accept it. What happened next wasn't just heartbreak, it was obsession. In the weeks following the breakup, Gurjinder called Maple's phone over 2,000 times. 2,000. He also sent her more than 2,000 text messages. This wasn't a guy trying to win her back. This was someone who believed Maple belonged to him. The harassment escalated quickly. According to court records, Gurjinder spat on one of Maple's friends outside a club. It was a public display of rage. a warning sign that everyone around them could see. Then, just days before Maple's murder, things got violent. Maple was having coffee with a longtime friend named Dylan at a Tim Hortons cafe. Security cameras captured what happened next. Gurjinder burst through the door, his face twisted with anger. He spotted Maple sitting with Dylan and stormed over. He took a swing at Dylan, right there in the cafe, in front of everyone. Maple, trying to calm the situation and protect her friend, escorted Gurjinder outside to the parking lot. She even got into his car. They drove away together. When she told Dylan about it later, she admitted something that should have set off every alarm. She said she was shaking. She said she was really scared. Dylan begged her to get a restraining order. He could see where this was heading. But Maple probably never imagined that the boy she once cared about would actually kill her. Police were called after the Tim Hortons incident. Gurjinder was arrested. A court ordered him to stay away from Maple. No contact, no exceptions. But a piece of paper doesn't stop someone who believes you belong to them. Prosecutors would later describe Gurjinder as a jealous ex-boyfriend who couldn't handle rejection. In his mind, if he couldn't have Maple, no one could. That kind of thinking is dangerous, deadly. Looking back now, the warning signs were everywhere. The constant calls, the texts, the public confrontations, the violence toward her friends. Gurjinder was spiraling, and everyone around Maple could see it. But no one could have predicted just how far he was willing to go. Because while Maple was trying to move on with her life, Gurjinder was making plans, dark plans. He bought a Bowie knife. He obtained a handgun, though investigators never confirmed how. And he recruited a friend to help him. September 26, 2011, was supposed to be just another Monday night, a study session at the library, nothing special. But for Gurjinder Dhaliwal, it was the night he decided Maple Batalia would never belong to anyone else. September 26th was a Monday. For Maple, it was just another night of studying. She had exams coming up, papers to write, the life of a dedicated pre-med student. She made plans to meet friends at the Simon Fraser University library. It stayed open late for students who needed quiet space to focus. Maple arrived around 10 at night with her friends. She settled in, opened her textbooks, got to work. But hours earlier, at 8:07 that evening, something else was happening. Security cameras captured a white Dodge Charger entering the university parking structure. The car had distinctive racing-style taillights. It circled the lot slowly, then it parked, and it waited. Inside that car, Gurjinder Dhaliwal sat with murder on his mind. He was armed with a gun and a knife, and he had been planning this for days. He had help too. A friend named Gursimar Bedi had rented the Charger the day before. According to prosecutors, Bedi served as Gurjinder's eyes and ears. He helped track Maple's movements. When she arrived at the library, Gurjinder knew exactly where she was. All he had to do was wait. Inside the library, Maple had no idea she was being hunted. Security footage shows her studying, laughing with classmates. She looks completely at ease. This is Maple in her element, surrounded by friends, working toward her dreams, living her life. At 1:01 in the morning, the library closed. Maple packed up her things and headed for the exit. She left with 3 male friends, including Dylan. The group walked together through the corridors, down the stairs, heading toward the parking garage. Surveillance cameras tracked their movement through the building. They were talking, relaxed. There was no sense of danger. And this is where those cameras became both a blessing and a curse. As Maple and her friends approached the parking lot exit, one security camera captured them clearly. But then, in what can only be described as the worst possible timing, the camera automatically swiveled away. These cameras were programmed to rotate on preset patterns. They covered different areas at different times. There was no tampering. No one manually moved the camera. It was just terrible, terrible timing. At the exact moment Maple Batalia needed surveillance coverage the most, the camera turned its mechanical eye away from her. At 1:04, 911 operators in Surrey started receiving calls.
Your emergency, sir?
I just heard gunshots, and it's on the other side of Surrey Central towards the bus station.
Okay, how many did you hear?
At least 7 in confession.
The calls were coming from all around Simon Fraser University. Dozens of witnesses reporting the same thing. Multiple gunshots fired in the campus parking structure. Surrey police dispatched every available unit to the scene. Sergeant Kevin Jeffrey was one of the first officers to arrive. He raced up to the 3rd floor of the parking garage. He had no idea if the shooter was still active, no idea what he was about to find. And then he saw her. Maple Batalia was lying between two vehicles. She had been shot 3 times, but that wasn't all. The back of her head showed 11 severe wounds. 11. Someone didn't just want Maple dead. They wanted to make absolutely certain she couldn't survive. But incredibly, against all odds, Maple was still breathing. Barely. Paramedics rushed her to Royal Columbian Hospital. Doctors fought desperately to save her life. She was young, strong. If anyone could survive this, maybe she could. The next 17 hours would be a fight for her life. But before we get to that, let me know in the comments. Have you ever felt unsafe on a campus or in a parking lot late at night? What safety measures do you think should be in place? For nearly 17 hours, Maple fought for her life in the intensive care unit. Doctors worked around the clock. Nurses monitored every breath, every heartbeat. The injuries were severe, but Maple was young, strong. There was still hope. In the ICU waiting room, her family gathered. Her father, Harkurat, her mother, Sarbjit, her older sister, Rosaline, a close family friend. They sat together in silence, praying, hoping for a miracle. The hours dragged on. Morning turned to afternoon. Afternoon turned to evening. Still, they waited. At 9:07 on the evening of September 27th, the doctors emerged. The news no parent should ever have to hear. 19-year-old Maple Batalia was gone. Sergeant Kevin Jeffrey had the horrible task of delivering the news to the family. He walked into that waiting room knowing he was about to shatter their world. And nothing in his training could have prepared him for what happened next. Maple's mother, Sarbjit, stood up. She walked toward him. Then she grabbed the back of his head with both hands. She pulled him down until their foreheads were touching. And she screamed directly into his face, "Bring me vengeance!" Her pain was so raw, so visceral. Everyone in that waiting room felt it. The other families, the nurses, the officers. It was the sound of a mother's heart breaking in real time. Harkurat could barely speak through his sobs. This was his precious jewel, his daughter who was going to become a doctor, who was going to make the family proud, who represented everything they had sacrificed for when they left India for a better life in Canada. And now she was gone, murdered in a campus parking garage by someone who thought he owned her. Rosaline stood beside her parents, trying to hold herself together, trying to be strong for them. But how do you process something like this? How do you move forward when your sister, your best friend, has been taken in the most violent way imaginable? That moment would haunt Sergeant Jeffrey for years. The image of Sarbjit pulling his head down, the sound of her scream, the weight of her words. "Bring me vengeance." It became his mission, the mission of every investigator on the case. They would find whoever did this. They would bring them to justice. They owed Maple that much. They owed her family that much. The investigation kicked into high gear immediately. Investigators knew the first 48 hours were critical. Sergeant Jeffrey assembled a team of detectives and forensic specialists. They had security footage to review. Hundreds of hours of it. And somewhere in that footage, they hoped to find Maple's killer. Detective Adam McIntosh, a specialist in audio and video analysis, began the painstaking work. He started with the library entrance. When did Maple arrive? Who was she with? Did anyone follow her inside? The footage showed Maple entering around 10:22. She was smiling, casual, completely unaware of any danger. Inside the library, cameras captured her studying, laughing with classmates. She looked happy, safe. Then McIntosh switched to the exit cameras. At 1:01 in the morning, Maple left the library with 3 young men. The group walked together toward the parking structure. Everything seemed normal. And then that parking lot camera swiveled away at the worst possible moment. Frustrated but determined, and a detective started reviewing footage from cameras positioned around the university perimeter. And that's when they spotted it. A white Dodge Charger speeding away from campus at 1:04. The car was moving so fast that the license plate was too blurred to read clearly. But investigators caught a break. They reviewed earlier footage from the parking structure and spotted the same white Dodge Charger entering at 8:07 that evening. Hours before Maple even arrived, someone had been waiting for her, waiting for over 4 hours. Now came the detective work. Surrey police contacted every rental car agency in British Columbia. They specifically asked about white Dodge Chargers rented around the time of the murder. It took time, nearly a full year actually, but eventually they got a hit. Avis Car Rental, September 25th. In 2011, 10:32 in the morning. Security cameras showed 2 young men entering the rental office. The first man approached the counter and handled the paperwork. His name was Gursamar Bedi. He was 20 years old, a student at Simon Fraser University. But he wasn't alone. The second man hung back near the entrance, and investigators recognized him immediately. His name was Gurjinder Dhaliwal, Maple's ex-boyfriend. When detectives looked deeper into Gurjinder's background, alarm bells started ringing. He had a criminal record. Multiple people described him as obsessed with Maple, and when they interviewed Maple's cousin, they learned something chilling. Gurjinder had been stalking Maple relentlessly since their breakup. Over 2,000 phone calls, constant text messages, showing up wherever she went. Days before her murder, he had physically attacked Maple's friend Dillich simply for having coffee with her. Then came the forensic breakthrough. Police had seized the white Charger just before it was scheduled to be cleaned. Inside, they found critical evidence, a shell casing under the hood of the car. It matched the caliber of bullets that killed Maple, but there was more. Investigators found blood spots in the vehicle. They matched Maple's DNA. They also found gunshot residue on the steering wheel. Whoever fired those shots had been inside that car. Cell phone records sealed the case. Gurjinder's phone was at the scene that night, and after the murder, his phone traveled away from campus. The same route, the same time. Everything lined up. Detectives brought Gursamar Bedi in for questioning. They laid out what they knew. He rented the car. He was with Gurjinder at the time, and that same car was used in Maple's murder. But Bedi refused to talk. He sat in that interrogation room, stone-faced, offering nothing. His loyalty to Gurjinder, or perhaps his fear of self-incrimination, kept him silent. But the forensic evidence spoke volumes. That shell casing was the smoking gun, literally, and Gurjinder Dhaliwal's fingerprints were all over this case. On December 1st, 2012, more than 15 months after Maple's murder, police finally made their arrests. Gurjinder Dhaliwal and Gursamar Bedi were taken into custody. Gurjinder was charged with first-degree murder. Bedi was charged with manslaughter, using a firearm, and being an accessory after the fact. Both men were held without bail. The case moved slowly through the courts. Delays, motions, legal arguments. Maple's family waited. They had already waited over a year for arrests. Now they would wait years more for justice. Then, on March 3, 2016, the day Gurjinder's trial was supposed to start, something unexpected happened. He pleaded guilty to second-degree murder. Gasps echoed through the courtroom. The full story came out through an agreed statement of facts. Crown Prosecutor Wendy Stephen read the details aloud. Members of Maple's family sobbed as they heard what happened that night. According to the statement, Gurjinder bought a Bowie knife after the Tim Hortons incident. He also obtained a handgun, though investigators never confirmed how. He claimed he went to the university that night to confront Delaj Dillon, but when he saw Maple hug her friend, he flew into a rage. He shot Maple 3 times as she walked alone toward her car. Then, as she collapsed to the ground, he stabbed her 11 times in the back of the head, 11 times. After that, he fled in the rented Charger. The courtroom had heard the truth. Gurjinder Dhaliwal had murdered Maple Batalia in cold blood. Now came the question everyone was waiting for. What would his sentence be? Gurjinder Dhaliwal received a mandatory sentence of life in prison. But the real question was parole eligibility. How long before he could apply to walk free? The Crown and defense made a joint submission. 21 years before parole eligibility. Prosecutor Wendy Stephen argued that this was higher than what an individual might typically receive for killing one person, but she said it reflected the gravity of the case. This happened in the context of a domestic relationship, a breakup. It involved a firearm used in a public place. There were other people around. There was serious danger that somebody else could have been hurt. She also emphasized something important. In this country, firearms are very seriously frowned upon. But here's what enraged Maple's family and the community. The charge had been reduced from first-degree murder to second-degree murder. First-degree murder means the killing was planned and deliberate. Gurjinder bought weapons days before. He rented a car through a friend to avoid detection. He waited for over 4 hours in a parking garage, armed and ready. He attacked Maple in a calculated manner using both a gun and a knife. This was textbook premeditated murder. But through the plea deal, it became second degree. And that meant Gurjinder would be eligible for parole after 21 years. He would be in his mid-40s. He gets the possibility of freedom, the chance to live a life, start over, maybe even have a family of his own someday. At the sentencing hearing, Maple's mother, Sarbjit, asked the question everyone was thinking. Why is this second degree? Why does he get parole after 21 years? The courtroom had no good answer for her. Then there was Gursamar Bedi, the man who rented the car, the man prosecutors described as Gurjinder's eyes and ears, the man who helped stalk Maple and made the murder possible. He was sentenced to 22 months in prison. 22 months. Less than 2 years for helping facilitate a brutal murder. And it gets worse. Betty didn't even serve the full sentence. He was released early after serving just 18 months for good behavior. Think about that. A young woman was stalked, hunted, shot 3 times, and stabbed 11 times in the head. And the man who made that murder possible walked free after 18 months. The community was outraged. Maple's family was devastated, but the justice system had spoken. Maple Batalia died at 19. She doesn't get a second chance. She doesn't get to become a doctor. She doesn't get to continue her acting career. She doesn't get to fall in love again, get married, have children. But her killer will be eligible for parole in his mid-40s, and his accomplice is already free. Over 800 people attended Maple's memorial service. Friends, family, classmates, complete strangers who had been moved by her story. They came from all religions, all backgrounds, united in their grief and their outrage. Maple was dressed in the outfit she had jokingly told her mother she wanted to wear on her wedding day. Instead, it became her funeral dress. Harkarat could barely speak at the service. When he did manage to get words out, he said that losing Maple felt like losing everything. His most precious jewel was gone. Life had lost all meaning. Rosaline, Maple's older sister, had to step forward to speak on behalf of the family. Her strength was remarkable in the face of such devastating loss. But that strength came at a cost. Imagine being the surviving daughter, hearing your father say he's lost everything when you're still standing right there. When Sarabjit saw Maple's body prepared for viewing, she noticed something. Her daughter's beautiful hair had been carefully arranged. It took a moment for her to understand why. The hair was concealing the wounds, 11 of them. 1 mark for each time Gurjinder had struck her with that knife. When the truth finally sank in, Sarabjit called Gurjinder what he truly was, a monster. The Batalia family established a scholarship at Simon Fraser University in Maple's name. It would help future students studying health sciences. The dreams Maple never got to fulfill would live on through others, but the pain never stopped. In September of 2019, approximately 8 years after the murder, the family received shocking news. Gurjinder Dhaliwal had been granted a 3.5-hour escorted leave from prison. He was allowed to view the body of a deceased grandparent. The family was outraged. He gets to grieve. He gets to say goodbye to someone he loved. Maple's family never got that chance. And they found her dying in a parking garage. They watched her fight for 17 hours. They never got to say a proper goodbye. The justice system gave Gurjinder Dhaliwal the possibility of freedom. Maple's family received a life sentence, a sentence of grief, of loss, of empty chairs at the dinner table, of birthdays that will never be celebrated, of grandchildren who will never exist. The warning signs were everywhere, over 2,000 phone calls, over 2,000 text messages, physical assaults on Maple's friends, stalking, a court order to stay away. And still, the system failed to protect her. It failed her before the murder, and it failed her again with the sentencing. So what can we learn from Maple's story? First, recognize escalation. Obsessive contact combined with physical aggression is serious danger. If someone refuses to accept a breakup and starts showing up uninvited, making constant calls, or getting violent, that's not love. That's control, and it can turn deadly. Second, document everything. Save the texts, record the calls, take screenshots, write down dates and times. Then pursue legal protections early. Restraining orders and no-contact orders create a legal record. They escalate consequences for violations. Third, campus safety matters. If you're leaving a building late at night, use escort services if they're available. Park in well-lit areas. Travel in groups when possible. Be aware of your surroundings. Fourth, bystanders have power. The staff at Tim Hortons called police when Gurjinder attacked Dilage. That created a record. That led to his arrest. If you see someone being threatened or harmed, report it. Your call could save a life. And finally, no means no. Rejection is not ownership. Breaking up with someone doesn't give them the right to stalk you, harass you, or hurt you. In this country, people are allowed to break up. Period. After Maple's death, Rosaline became a powerful advocate for victims' rights. Her eloquence and strength became a testament to her sister's legacy. in March of 2018 on what would have been Maple's 26th birthday. A documentary called Remembering Maple was screened at Simon Fraser University. The film recounted her life, her death, and the 5-year fight to bring her killers to justice. The Batalia family continues to fight against youth violence and domestic violence. They speak publicly, they educate. They honor Maple's memory by trying to prevent other families from experiencing the same pain. Maple's dreams died with her in that parking garage. She never became a doctor. She never continued her acting career. She never got to paint again, or fall in love, or start a family. But her legacy lives on, in the scholarships that bear her name, in the advocacy work her family does, and in the lives her story may save. If this case moved you, please share it. Maple's story deserves to be heard, and if you or someone you know is experiencing stalking or harassment, reach out for help. The warning signs don't get better on their own. They get worse. Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and I'll see you in the next one.